Let me ask you something right at the start. Have you ever looked around one day, really looked around and realized that the life you're living doesn't quite belong to you? That somehow, somewhere along the way, you started living somebody else's version of life, somebody else's schedule, somebody else's habits, somebody else's attitude about money, about ambition, about what's possible. I've been there. And I'll tell you, it was one of the most uncomfortable discoveries I ever made. Not because somebody forced me into it, but because I had allowed it slowly, quietly, over a long period of time. And the culprit was my environment, not my intelligence, not my dreams, not even my work ethic, my environment, the people around me, the conversations I kept having, the things I looked at every day, the voices I listened to. See, here's what most people never stop to consider. Your environment is always doing something to you. Always. It's either pulling you up or pulling you down. It's either expanding your thinking or slowly shrinking it. And if you never stop to audit it, to really examine it, you'll spend years working hard and wondering why you're not moving forward. That's what I want to talk about today. Now, the reason this subject matters so much to me is because I spent the early years of my adult life without any real awareness of it. I was raised in a small farming community in Idaho. Good people, hard-working people, but the conversations were small. The expectations were limited. Nobody around me was talking about philosophy, about building wealth, about becoming more as a person. And so I just absorbed what was there, like a sponge, without realizing it. I used to think the reason I wasn't getting ahead was bad luck, bad timing, or maybe something missing inside me. I'd look at successful people and think they must have something I don't have, some gift, some advantage, some break they caught that I hadn't caught yet. And then I met a man by the name of Earl Schoaf. And he said something to me that changed everything. He said, "Jim, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." Now, I'd heard things like that before and sort of nodded along without letting it land. But this time I actually sat with it. And I thought, if that's true, then I need to take a very honest look at who's in my circle and what those 5 people are doing to my average. That was the beginning of my understanding of environment. Not just who you know, but what surrounds you, what you read, what you listen to, what you look at every day, what kind of conversations fill your hours. All of it shapes you, all of it. And the people who understand that really understand it. Not just intellectually, but practically. They use their environment deliberately. They design it. They audit it, and then they have the courage to change it when it needs changing. Here's what's interesting about environment. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk in the door and say, "Hello, I'm here to limit your thinking." It works quietly. It works slowly. The way wind shapes stone, not in an afternoon, but over years. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was asked to speak in a city where a group of young salespeople were struggling. They were talented, they were trained well, but their numbers were poor and their spirit was low. I spent a day with them and I started asking questions. Not about their products, not about their sales techniques. I asked about their lunch conversations. I asked about what they talked about in the break room. I asked about who they carpooled with. And what I found was this: the culture in that office was one of complaint. Every day, people were gathered around talking about what the company wasn't doing for them, about unfair territories, about leads that weren't good enough, about management that didn't care. Now, here's the thing. Some of those complaints may have even been valid. But the constant rehearsal of complaint, the daily ritual of it, was poisoning those young people. Every single day they were reinforcing a story that said, The odds are against me. The situation is unfair. I probably won't make it. And so they didn't, not because of the company, not because of their territories, but because their environment had convinced them of a conclusion before they'd even made the attempt. That's how environment works. It whispers. And if you're not paying attention, you'll start believing what it says. So the first thing I want you to do, and this is practical, you can do this today, is listen. Really listen to the conversations around you. What do people in your world talk about most? Do they talk about ideas, about goals, about what's possible? Or do they mostly talk about people, about problems, about what's wrong? That's your first audit. Now let me get a little more specific about the people dimension of your environment, because I think this is where most people are either too naive or too afraid to be honest. You see, every person in your life is modeling something for you. They're showing you day after day what life looks like, what's normal, what's acceptable, what's possible. And whether you realize it or not, your nervous system is absorbing that constantly. I discovered something years ago. I noticed that when I spent time with people who were building something, building a business, building a family, building their character, I'd come away from those conversations energized. My ideas would get sharper. My ambitions would get bigger. I'd go home and want to read, want to plan, want to take action. But when I spent time with people who were stuck, people who had given up on some important part of their potential, I'd come away feeling a little heavier, a little more doubtful, a little more inclined to say, well, maybe I'm asking for too much. Same person, different company, completely different result. Now, I'm not saying you only spend time with rich people or with people who are further ahead than you financially. That's not the point, and that would be a misunderstanding of the whole principle. What I'm saying is seek out people who are serious about life, people who hold themselves to a standard, people who read, people who ask good questions, people who take their own development seriously. Those people will lift your standard just by association, without even trying, just by being who they are around you. And here's the harder side of that equation. Sometimes you have to limit your exposure to people who are pulling your standard down. I know that's uncomfortable to say, but it's honest. Now, I'm not talking about abandoning your family. I'm not talking about walking away from old friends cold. I'm talking about being thoughtful about how much of your time and your emotional energy goes into certain relationships. Some people in your life are like anchors. They mean well. You love them. But they have a weight about them, a doubt, a cynicism, a resignation. And when you spend too much time around that energy, it eventually starts to feel like your own. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to make a scene. You just start being a little more intentional about where you invest your hours. I made this decision when I was in my late 20s, and the difference in my life was staggering. Not overnight, but over time. The conversations I was having changed. The things I was thinking about changed. The goals I was setting changed. It all started with a quiet, honest audit of the people surrounding me. Now let me move from people to place, because where you live and how you keep it is also speaking to you every day. Now, I'm not talking about whether your house is expensive. I'm talking about what it communicates. I've been in modest homes that communicated ambition, books on every shelf, a journal on the kitchen table, a Bible worn soft from use, papers from an ongoing project spread out on the desk. Those homes said work is happening here, growth is happening here. And I've been in expensive homes that communicated surrender, no books, no projects, no evidence that the people inside were building toward anything. Everything comfortable, everything easy, everything arranged for entertainment. Those homes said, we've stopped. Your physical environment sends your subconscious a message every single day. And your subconscious, bless its heart, believes what it sees. So let me ask you honestly, what is your home saying to you? Are there books in it? Do you have a space where you think, where you plan, where you create? Or is your evening mostly a migration from the dinner table to the television and then to bed? I'm not against television. Used carefully, it can be instructive. But I am against the habit of filling every idle hour with noise, with distraction, with other people's stories, while your own story goes unwritten. Here's something practical. Find one corner of your life physical space, actual square footage, and make it yours. Make it a place for growth, a chair with a lamp where you read, a desk where you plan, a shelf where you keep the books that are shaping you. That corner will start shaping you back. I promise you that. Now I want to talk about something a little less obvious, but just as powerful. The information environment. See, in the world we're living in now, there is more noise than there has ever been in human history. More opinions, more entertainment, more argument, more distraction, and all of it wants your attention. And here's what most people don't understand. Attention is a resource. It's finite. You only have so much of it in a day. And wherever your attention goes consistently, that's where your thinking gets shaped. I made a decision years ago to be very careful about what I invited into my mind. Not out of fear, not out of some rigid discipline for its own sake, but because I understood that what goes in comes out, always. If you spend your evenings watching angry programs about why the world is falling apart, and there are plenty of those, don't be surprised if your dominant emotion becomes anxiety and suspicion. If you spend your commute listening to complaints, to gossip dressed up as news, to people arguing without any intention of learning, don't be surprised if that becomes the texture of your thinking. But here's the flip side of that. If you spend 30 minutes every morning reading something worth reading, philosophy, biography, business, history, the scriptures, something that stretches you, your thinking will begin to change, slowly at first. But the compound effect of that habit over a year, over 5 years, is extraordinary. I've often said that formal education will earn you a living, but self-education will earn you a fortune. And I didn't mean that only financially. I meant it in terms of quality of thought, quality of character, quality of life. The books you read, the recordings you listen to, the conversations you choose, these are all part of your information environment, and you get to choose them. That's the extraordinary gift here. You get to choose what comes in. Most people treat their mind like an open window in a storm. They'll let anything blow through. The disciplined person treats their mind like a garden. You choose what seeds go in. You water some things. You pull other things out before they take root. That's not narrow-mindedness. That's wisdom. Now, let me get very practical, because I don't want to leave you with just ideas. I want to leave you with a process. When I talk about auditing your environment, here's what that means in simple, honest terms. You sit down, not for hours, just for a concentrated 30 minutes, and you ask yourself 4 questions. First question, who am I around most? List the 5 or 6 people you spend the most time with. Write their names down. Then, next to each name, write one honest word that describes the dominant energy or attitude they bring to your life. Is it possibility? Is it complaint? Is it ambition? Is it cynicism? Is it encouragement? Be honest, not harsh, honest. Then look at the list and ask yourself, if I become the average of these people, Am I happy with where that average points? Second question, what am I listening to? What fills the background of your day? When you drive, when you cook, when you exercise, what's playing? What voices are filling those hours? What messages are they carrying? And in the evening, when you have discretionary time, what do you give it to? What are you absorbing? Third question, what does my physical space say? Walk through your home or your office slowly. Look at it like a stranger. What impression does it give you? Does it feel like the space of someone who is building something or someone who has quietly stopped? What's on the shelf? What's on the desk? What's visible? What's accessible? What surrounds you daily? Fourth question, what would I need to change to be in a better environment 1 year from now? Not 5 years, 1 year. That's manageable. That's real. Maybe you need to find one new relationship, one mentor, one peer, one community of people who are serious about growth. Maybe you need to cut one information source that's been pulling your thinking down. Maybe you need to rearrange one corner of your home and make it intentional. Small changes, consistent changes, over time, those small changes add up to a completely different environment and a completely different life. Now, here's the part that I think gets left out of most conversations about environment, and I think it's the most important part of all. If you want a better environment, you can't just audit the one you have. You have to become someone who deserves a better one. Let me explain what I mean. Better environments don't just fall from the sky. They're attracted. And the people who attract good environments, good mentors, good collaborators, good opportunities, are people who bring something to the table. See, I found that when I started investing in myself, reading seriously, thinking seriously, taking my growth seriously, the people I encountered started to change. Not because I moved to a different city, not because I suddenly had money to put on the table, but because I was becoming a different kind of conversationalist. I was becoming somebody who was interesting to talk to, somebody who had ideas, somebody who asked good questions. And good people are drawn to other people who are genuinely interested in growth. Here's how it works in practice. You can't walk into a room of ambitious, accomplished people and expect them to invest in you if you haven't invested in yourself. You can't expect a better quality of conversation if you're not bringing better quality of thinking. The environment audit, if you do it rightly, is really 2 audits in one. You're auditing what's around you, yes, but you're also auditing what you're bringing to your environment. Are you the kind of person somebody smarter than you would want to know? Are you interesting? Are you growing? Are you reading? Do you have ideas that would benefit someone else? If the answer isn't satisfying right now, and for many people at the beginning of this journey, it won't be, that's not a criticism. That's just an honest starting point. And honest starting points are the only ones that lead anywhere. Start becoming someone worth being around. Read, think, develop skills, develop character. And as you do, I promise you the quality of your environment will begin to shift naturally. Now, one more thought before I bring this to a close. Not every difficult environment is one you should leave. I want to be very clear about that. There are seasons in life where the environment is hard because you're being prepared. Think of a sapling in the wind. A little wind actually strengthens the roots. A tree that grows in still air falls over at the first real storm. Difficulty, properly understood, is sometimes part of the design. So I'm not suggesting you run from every challenging environment. I'm not suggesting you abandon every relationship that stretches you. Friction can teach. Adversity can build. What I am saying is this: there's a difference between an environment that challenges you and one that diminishes you. one that stretches your capacity and one that corrodes your belief. Challenging environments leave you tired but growing. Diminishing environments leave you tired and shrinking. You'll know the difference if you're honest with yourself. And most of us, if we're being truthful, already know which category our current environment falls into. The question is whether we have the courage to act on what we know. That takes honesty. It takes a willingness to look clearly at your situation without making excuses for it. And it takes the understanding that nobody is coming to rescue you. This is your life. These are your choices. And the environment you're in right now is largely the result of decisions you've already made. The good news, and there is good news, is that the environment you're in 1 year from now will be the result of decisions you make starting today. That is a tremendous amount of power. If you'll use it, you know, I've spoken at thousands of seminars over the years, and I've had the privilege of meeting people from every kind of background. People who grew up with nothing and built remarkable lives. And people who started with every advantage and somehow managed to squander most of it. And when I reflect on the difference, so much of it comes back to this single thing we've talked about today, environment. The people who built well were intentional about their surroundings. They were thoughtful about who they let close. They were careful about what they put in their minds. They created spaces, physical, intellectual, relational, that pulled them forward rather than held them back. And here's what I want you to take from today. More than any technique or list, the environment that surrounds you right now is a reflection of decisions you made somewhere in your past. Maybe last year, maybe 10 years ago, maybe in your 20s when you weren't thinking carefully yet. But those decisions, accumulated, produce the environment you're currently swimming in. And here's the quiet truth about that: you made those decisions, which means you can make new ones. You don't have to announce a dramatic change to the world. You don't have to burn anything down. You just have to start making slightly better decisions about who you spend time with, what you put in your mind, how you arrange your space, and what you allow into your daily experience. Slightly better, consistently better. That's all it takes. Over time, I want to leave you with this. The most successful people I've ever known were not the most naturally gifted. They were not the most educated by formal standards. They were not even, in many cases, the hardest workers. What they had, the thing they all shared, was an environment that kept pulling them toward their potential. Some of them built that environment deliberately. Some stumbled into it by fortunate association. But they were all in it, and they were shaped by it. You can build that environment deliberately, starting now. You already know what the first step is. You already know what needs to change. The question is whether you'll be honest enough with yourself and courageous enough in your choices to actually change it. I believe you can. Now the question is, do you? Think about it.